All right, Internet, welcome back. So, today I wanted to show you what I've been up to in the last 2 weeks. So, two and a half weeks ago, I decided to read my first audit report. And quickly after that, I decided to read 10 or 11 more of those. Reason being is I wanted to get a better understanding of how audit reports are structured, how they hopefully come about discovering the findings they find, and also kind of weighing the differences and hopefully trying to find patterns amongst the different auditing firms I've read to see if there's anything of interest of like maybe common flaws or common ways of structuring a finding, or maybe even different types of exploits that sit within certain scenarios. And also just to better understand the approaches from different auditing firms. So did all that stuff, read all those things, and I decided to write a blog post and also make this video to summarize some of the findings and also kind of walk through my ideal audit report if I could structure all of them. So if I could say all the auditing firms to keep the same structure, that would be the ideal situation for me, which you'll quickly find out isn't true for everybody. So with that being stated, I'm not going to go through everything inside of this blog. I'm just going to talk through some of the points that I wanted to add more context to. So it's slightly different, this video, than the post itself. So these are the 4 auditing firms that I've gone through. So you can see in this photo, I decided to go with Trail of Bits, Paladine, Blockchain Security, and then Consensus Diligence and Chain Security. These are the 4 I wanted to go through. Of these 4, I would say these 2 are the best, and these 2 come in second place. And I'll talk through specifically why that's the case as we go through here. For each one of these different firms, I decided to read three. It looks like 2 just for Paladine because they came as last minute addition. But Trail of Bits, Consensus, Chain Security, and Paladine, I read 2 to 3 for each of these different auditing reports to get a good idea of kind of how they structured their audit reports and also their findings. From there, I wanted to cover one big thing here is when I said ideal structure for me, I really wanted to emphasize me because the way that I think about audit reports and the way that most audit reports I assume are read by the audience are 2 different types of people. So there are investors that read these, and there are also builders. So when I say builders, I'm also talking about people that secure things as well, so security folks. So the investors, they usually need to basically look at a small subset of the report, not the entire thing. And when they're looking at the subset of the report, really their intent should be is to basically figure out, am I willing to risk my money with this specific protocol or contract based off of what I can read from this report. The builders, on the other hand, kind of want to dig deeper into many of the details, trying to understand, like I mentioned, common patterns of security flaws, understanding how they came to the conclusion they came to, and also those that actually built the contract, how they can actually mitigate those issues, and then for me, trying to recreate interesting findings. So those are different types of perspectives of how you would want to approach a report, or at least the audience in my head would approach a report. So with that being said, my ideal structure. So this ideal structure has how many points? 9. And of these 9 points, it's an amalgamation of all these different firms together. So each one of these sections have links to the firm that I felt did the best. So in here you can see that I've mentioned 2 for some of these. So for instance, the quality of writing, this is the most important piece for me. And I emphasize this above in this kind of blog. So if you go through the top of the blog, you realize that out of everything that a report can do or an auditing firm can do, in my opinion, the most important thing they can do is actually have high quality writing. So when they convey a message to somebody, it's simplified to the point where your audience, your reader, doesn't necessarily have to struggle through the jargon or through the broken up or shortened sentences that actually aren't complete. So I've seen that in a lot of firms that I've read through, a lot of the reports, but I felt that of these, there are certain sections inside of both Paladine as well as Trail of Bits that I felt did the best. That doesn't mean that they're perfect. So some of the reports are somewhat jargony and hard to understand because the sentences aren't complete or they're not necessarily structured in a way that a reader would be able to consume it. But in a nutshell, I think these 2 firms did the best when it comes to their ability to simplify complex topics and convey it to a mass audience, which I would assume most firms want to do when writing these reports so they can actually educate as well as basically assist those contracts and informing and bettering their security. And I put a little quote here from Malcolm Gladwell, which I think summarizes this in a nutshell. Is basically, writing should be simple enough that it does not defeat the reader. This is really important for writing in general, but definitely for writing complex topics like security within smart contracts. So that's the first and foremost, that's the most important piece. So out of everything else, that's the most important. The rest of it is actually the structure of the report that I found most useful and insightful for someone that's trying to approach an audit report from scratch. So for these pieces, I've written out in the text what each section's for. I've linked to the firm that I think did the best for this specific part of the section, and then also added some context as to why some of these firms did the best in these sections. But instead of reading this text to you, which you can do yourself, I'm going to show you in my notes in Joplin. I actually Frankensteined an audit report together. So let's go to that section here. Cool. So in here, I basically have a bunch of screenshots of different parts of reports synthesized into a single kind of segment of what would be ideal for me. And I'll highlight a few things from each of these that I felt were the best for each of these firms. So the first thing is going to be the executive summary. So that's kind of a given. And like I already stated, Paladin Blockchain Security and also TrailofBits I felt like did the best for both of these, or for the entirety of this. So if I had to rank all these firms out of 4, I would say TrailofBits is number 1 and then Paladin's number 2. So when looking at this, let's look at the executive summary. The executive summary, this is from TrailofBits here, and what they did and what I really appreciated is they actually talked about the overview of the engagement. So how long did they work on this and what were their expectations? What's the scope of the project? So what should they be working on? And then also the summary of the findings. And the summary of the findings is really interesting here because their summary of the findings was very concise and to the point. So concise and to the point that they could actually include it in the executive summary right below this. So you can see they have their exposure analysis. So this is the severity and then how many are associated to that count. They have the categorical breakdown, which actually wasn't the case for all firms. So only I think it was Chain Security and TrailofBits that had specific categories of types of exploits that they're looking at. And you can see they have the count for each of these, which I really appreciated because when you're looking at these, you want to understand, you want to try to uncover patterns when reading through the reports. And if they assist you with finding those patterns, it actually, it's more insightful and more effective for those that are reading it. So you can see this here, which is quite useful for both of these. That's the executive summary. Another thing I wanted to add is I think this was Chain Security. Let me double check my notes. Yeah, Chain Security did this, which I really thought was quite cool. It's a very small thing, but I'm sure it means a lot to those that read these reports, at least the smart contractor protocols. So Chain Security and every single executive summary, they always thank the protocol for allowing them to actually work on this and provide security to their smart contract. So it's small, but they say thank you every time, which I really appreciated. The next thing here is the system overview. So this, I think, may have been Chain Security again. Let's double check. Limitations, executive summary. Yeah, this is Chain Security. So Chain Security, what they did is they included inside of here a system overview, which simply walks through the purpose of this contract, why it exists, what is it supposed to do at a high level. And I appreciated this because some of the contracts or some of the auditing firms would touch on this, but they would touch on it briefly where it wasn't complete and it was hard to understand how each of the findings fit within the larger picture of the contract. So what they've done here at the beginning is they've basically stated at a high level, like I said, what the contract's for, why it's important, and then from that higher level 10,000 foot view, you can actually zoom in and understand it better. So I appreciated that. The next part is all the auditing firms have a limitation section. I felt that this group here, which may have been Chain Security again, so let's check the notes. Chain Security. So Chain Security did a really good job here basically covering what limitations there are, specifying the importance of understanding what these limitations are, and really the gist of this entire section is basically to cover your own ass when it comes to being an auditing firm. So they're basically saying, hey, just because we've done an audit on your smart contract does not necessarily mean it's completely secure. So this piece is actually for educational purposes. So we're trying to educate the reader. So the reader could be, like I said, an investor or a builder, for them to understand specifically that even though this is audited, it doesn't mean that it's secure. It just means that we found some weaknesses in the contract that need to be improved, but there could be more that we're unaware of, and also the things that are out of scope we missed. So this is a really good thing to both educate the reader and also cover the firm's legal requirements. So that's the limitations piece, and I think they did a pretty good job at summarizing it for all the reports. Another thing here, so this is consensus diligence. I think did this. Let's see, control flow. Yeah. So consensus diligence actually was the only firm that I witnessed do this, which is basically taking the flow of all the contracts and showing you what that flow looks like and how they'll interact with each other. So this is another thing that I wished all reports contained. I know it's not necessarily practical for all reports to contain this, but if they could, that would be amazing. Reason being is that this goes back to the point that I made around the system overview above, where it gives you a 10,000 foot view of the contract. So when you go into the details of the specific findings, it gives you more context so you can understand those more efficiently and more effectively. So having a high level flow to walk you through how everything interacts within the contract, or at least the subsets that you're looking at as an auditor, would be ideal. Automating tests. So this is interesting. Trail of Bits is the only firm that specified what tests they ran and the results of those tests when it comes to automation. They also did a really great job at actually sharing the echidna tests at the end of the appendix and also any of the additional tests they ran, so that the developers for that contract could actually take those tests and then improve on them over time. So they could actually build on top of them and incorporate longer term security posture. And throughout the recommendations that Trail of Bits made, they always emphasize the importance of incorporating Echidna, Slither, and other testing mechanisms inside of your CI/CD pipeline. So mainly the continuous integration piece. So you're incorporating those tests as the code is then kind of going through that pipeline to then eventually be deployed. They really emphasize that for the long-term recommendation. And I think it's great that they did that. And I think it's great that they actually covered this as well. So I know that a lot of firms use automated testing, so that's kind of part of it. But not many of them talk about it within the report or emphasize the importance of doing so as a developer or as a contract creator. So that's one thing I appreciated that they did. And I know that they're pretty adamant about building tools as well, like Trail of Bits themselves, the company. So I think that's great, and I think it's a high bar they've set that many other firms should try to follow. But I know it takes a lot of effort to do so. Anywho, the automated testing here shows you basically what tools they used, and then below that you can see that it basically starts out showing you which tests were ran and how they passed, or if they passed. And it's just a great practice, and I really appreciated that they included it and that they emphasized that throughout the entirety of the report. So that was one piece I wish more firms included. Another thing here is the code base maturity. So this was, I think, Trail of Bits definitely did the best here, and I didn't mention any other firms. I think maybe one or two other firms included this, but not as explicitly as Trail of Bits did. And the reason I appreciated this is a few reasons. So one, as an investor, you can use this section to get a better understanding of the quality of the code, or at least the quality of the team when it comes to the maturity of their code base. And the maturity of the code base comes down to a series of things. So it's security, it's the correctness of that code and how that matches up to their specifications. And also it's the general decency of quality documentation, both inside of the code and outside of the code, and how everything matches up, which kind of comes back to the correctness. So their opinion here is somewhat subjective. It's based off of their experience and things like that. There are some objective kind of variables that are encompassed into their rating or the evaluation of the maturity. But in the end, as an investor or even as a builder that's somewhat new to the space, relying upon their experience and their knowledge, they're referring to Trail of Bits, helps understand what quality code looks like in comparison to other peers within the building space of DeFi or different subsectors of smart contracts. And what they've done here is a great job at really summarizing that in a simplified table and specifying specifically the maturity of the code base when it comes to different sections. So they have arithmetic, auditing, authentication, access and control, etc., and it's all encompassed in all the tables for all the reports. So I thought that was another really cool thing that I would love to be encompassed inside of an auditing report. That would be ideal for me. All right, next thing is findings. So once we get to the findings, this is where like the nitty-gritty detail comes into play. And I remember I already referred to Paladine and Trail of Bits as being the best, and they both included this inside of their summaries as well. So what I have here is I think this is a combination of Trail of Bits and Paladin, isn't it? Oh no, chain security, Trail of Bits. This doesn't look like Trail of Bits. It's not. I don't think it is. Wait a second, internet. This is Trail of Bits. Either way, they did a great job in categorizing certain items. I don't think this is theirs, but it gets the gist across because theirs is very similar. So you can see that what they're doing, I'm not really sure, I think this is Paladin because there's this, colorful and purple. But what they've done here, and this is the same thing Trail of Bits does, is that they basically define severity, and they break down severity into different categories. So you have high, medium, and low. And the one thing I liked about Paladin and what they've done here is they've actually specified, and they've gone into somewhat more detail of explaining how they rank severity and what is encompassed inside of that. Other firms have done that, but they were a lot shorter and more to the point. And they've added more material here to hopefully educate the reader to help them understand where they're coming from when it comes to this piece, but not getting too wordy or jargony, which is important. Another thing here is a summary. Okay, so this summary is from Trail of Bits. And what you're going to see above each detailed finding within Trail of Bits is this header here. So this header is basically going to tell you what the title is of it, and then it's going to basically include this table. And then below that, it's going to be a bunch of text and code and stuff explaining the specific finding that they're going to talk through in depth. But the really cool thing here is what they've done is they've shown you severity. So what's the severity of this, low, medium, high, etc. They've showed you the type, the category of finding. So this is a patching finding. The difficulty here is high, and what difficulty is referring to is how difficult is this for somebody to exploit, which is another interesting thing that I like that they've included. So that's set to high, an ID for the finding, and then target consideration / I think target is referring to where the code sits inside the repo. But anywho, I really appreciated this and how they've gone through this is because they've included this for every single finding, so you can get a quick snapshot of saying, okay, how difficult is this for somebody to exploit, what's the severity, etc. And then they walk through that in detail, which I really appreciated. The categories I've already explained, so they have the categories, which is rare. So Trail of Bits as well as Chain Security are the only ones that have that, at least from the 4 firms I've read from. Here's another example from Chain Security for finding categories. One point here is what they did for the terminology I appreciated is they've included what is encompassed in severity. So I know that that's included for Paladin, what I've explained above, but they've also kind of put this in a way that is interesting as well, where they've basically stated likelihood. So you have likelihood plus impact equals severity. That's like the equation for severity for most security firms inside and outside of Web3. And they've included it in here, which I felt was a good educational piece for a lot of readers that might not necessarily have a lot of experience in security. So I liked how they've kind of approached that. Down here, you can see they've included that in a table as well. So you can see basically when you combine something that's high likelihood with something that's high impact, then you're going to get something that's a critical. So this is a very simple way to use that table to tell a lot of information to a new reader without necessarily having to add a lot of text and jargon. Findings, another thing that they did is the categorization. So remember, Chain Security and Trail of Bits are the only ones that have done something like this that I could find. So here you can say they're divvying it out into security findings, design findings, and then correctness findings. So correctness is basically a difference between specification and implementation. Design is the actual architecture of the contract and how it's structured. And then security is, you know what that is. So the vulnerabilities that we can find. So I like that. And last thing about Chain Security is each of their findings, the title encompass something similar to what Trail of Bits did. Instead of having a table, they just have these tags. And these tags are basically tapped up against each one of the findings. So you can actually, at a quick snapshot, say, okay, I can see that this is specifically talking about correctness. It's specifically a medium severity. Version 2 is the contract that we're looking at. And then you can actually see what they did. So the specification changed. So that means they actually did something. So the contract firm, the builders, changed the specification to then meet the recommendation they provided here. So I liked how they kind of like synthesized everything into a small little snapshot of tags so you can quickly understand what's going on without having to try to grok your way through it. So that's that piece. That's the categorization, the severity and finding section. The next piece is, and the last piece is actually this here for Trail of Bits. So the mention I wanted to bring here is that Trail of Bits is actually the only firm that I found that for every single finding they included an exploit scenario. And I felt this is very important. And the reason this is important is because when you're looking through a finding, it's more convincing to a developer to actually implement your recommendation if they understand how this exploit can manifest in their contract. And this is exactly what they're talking through in every single one of these exploit scenarios, is specifically telling you how can this be exploited, and this is the scenario of how that would manifest. And I think it's great because most of the explanations that TrailofBits provided in this section were actually simple enough to understand at first read. So you can read through it once and you understand it. Sometimes you had to go back through some of the larger ones to grok your way through it, but they've done a great job of simplifying this and also including it in the first place. So kudos to them for having this. And the other thing for recommendations is I've included for recommendations TrailofBits and Paladine as two of the firms that did the best. Reason I've included just one here is because Paladine, really what they did is they did a great job at simplifying, so the recommendations weren't too long and they were kind of straight to the point, but they didn't necessarily leave out too much detail, so that was good. But what TrailofBits did I really appreciated is almost every single recommendation included two sections. One was a short-term recommendation and one was a long-term recommendation. So the short-term recommendations basically do this quick fix, so when you deploy or as it's deployed, you no longer have to worry about this, at least currently. The long-term fix is saying this is a larger issue, so not just this specific find, but the subcategory to this find. The reason this is occurring is because this flaw in your process, your architecture, all that stuff, and they kind of talk through specifically how you can improve your ability to remediate or detect these types of things going forward if you incorporate this type of thing into your process. So this was a really cool thing that I appreciated from TrailofBits, and that's another huge kudos to them for actually incorporating that type of recommendation. So in the end, this is my perfect audit report. So we have exec summary, we have a thank you from the auditing firm to make me feel good about allowing them to work on it, or at least being grateful. We have a system overview to understand the contract. We have limitations to understand and educate the reader exactly why this is not necessarily secure forever. We have contract flow to understand what the hell's going on. We have an automated test, which shows me that automated test is important and I should incorporate it into my CI/CD pipeline. We have code-based maturity, so I can get a quick glance as an investor or a builder to understand what good looks like when it compares to peers. Finding summary, we have categories and severity, so we can better understand patterns as we're reading through this stuff. We have an exploit scenario, so I can understand specifically how this manifests. And we have recommendations, both short-term and long-term, so I can improve my security over time. So that is my perfect audit report. That is most of the blog post. So you can stop the video now and go off and live your life, or you can stick around and I'm going to talk a little bit more through my inspirations. So why specifically did I write this report in the first place, and why did I decide to read so many audit reports in such a semi-short time frame? So I came across a few blogs that I wanted to share, and this is all linked in the blog post, so you can go see it. First and foremost is Bowtied Island. So this Bowtied Pickle did a great job at actually walking through specifically how to read an audit report and why they're important. So I highly recommend reading this blog and getting an idea of what to look for, because there's definitely more information in there that I didn't point out that I feel is useful for those that are interested in reading audit reports. Another one here is Cloudflare. That's blocking me. Perfect. So it's rugdoc.io. And what they did is they actually did a comparison between a series of different auditing firms. They have a video as well, so they do a summary video that you can watch. And then also they have a cool little table down here at the bottom that is a comparison. And it gives you a breakdown of all the different auditing firms and how they've ranked them for security and quality of the report. So I thought that was quite cool as well. And the last thing here is actually a white paper. So this white paper is definitely highly recommended, and I actually highly recommend reading this white paper before you do any, maybe read like one audit report, get very confused, go read this white paper, and then go back to read more audit reports, because that's kind of the process I did, and it made way more sense after I read this report when I was reading the auditing reports. Reason being is that this is a white paper from TrailofBits, and what they did is they did a mass study on, I think it's 20, not sure how many reports. It's like 23, based on 23 audits. Yeah, so they did 23 audits from TrailofBits, and they did like a macro examination of the common flaws that are within contracts. And this is as of, I think, like 2020 or 2021. And this is really the report to understand as a security or aspirational security engineer within Web3, is to understand what are some of the common flaws within smart contracts and some of the reasons why those common flaws exist. One thing I'll share in this white paper was a table that I thought was pretty fascinating. Here, this one. So in this table here, what they're showing is basically the percentage of different categories that are detectable by automated testing. So each of these categories has both a dynamic test and a static test percentage. And you can see from here that the different categories that are the most likely to get caught by different tests. So you can see cryptography is 100% with static testing. You can see that over here we have 57% for data validation for dynamic testing. And then for these, this is going to be the I'm call it like enchilada or echidna. It's echidna, I think. Enchilada is easier to remember, but echidna is what it's called. And then slither is the other test that they ran here. So that was really cool to kind of examine this and look through some of the main categories of what are spotted and what aren't spotted. So documentation, API inconsistency. Some of these are like front running. A lot of these are like major misses configuration by these tests, just due to the nature of the tests. So anywho, really great white paper. That was an inspiration for me to do this. But with that being stated, I think that is everything. So internet, I'll see you in the next video, which may or may not be off-chain security for Web3 folk. See you around.